Welcome to Kansas Ag Reports. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, our January conversation with Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. We'll discuss the latest Waters of the U.S. proposal from the Biden administration. We'll also have features from Kansas Wheat, Kansas Corn, and the Kansas Farm Bureau, and the weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion. Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com. In agriculture news, Senate Ag Committee Chair Debbie Stabenow from Michigan announcing she will not be running for re-election in 2024. The four-term senator said a big part of her decision to step aside was to make room for new voices. But between now and 2024, she said she'll concentrate on passing a new farm bill before she retires. She said the farm bill determines the nation's food and ag policies and is also key to protecting the land and water and creating jobs in both rural and urban communities. Stabenow has played a big role in several farm bills. Her decision will increase pressure, though, to pass a new farm bill while she's in office rather than just extending the current legislation. Farmers National Company said the land market momentum that began late in 2021 only picked up in the pace in 2022. Competition for high-quality cropland resulted in both record sales and overall increases in land values. Strong demand in all the country's regions brought significant opportunities to landowners interested in capitalizing on the current land market. In most cases, landowners selling property experienced never-before-seen values of their farmland. The final results set records in several states and increased year-to-year values between 20 and 34% in the Corn Belt. Farmers National said the traditional local farmer operators were the successful buyers of land in 75% of their transitions, and commodity markets are the main driver for those higher land values. And Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack announcing an investment of $9.6 million across the country, taking several other steps to help farmers, ranchers, and processors, as well as rural businesses, diversify the meat supply. He said the goal is to give people access to healthier foods, eliminate bottlenecks in the food supply chain, and ultimately lower prices for consumers. He announced a total of 25 new investments to increase independent meat processing capacity. Those investments include 23 value-added producer grant programs totaling just under $4 million to help producer-owned companies process and market new products. They're also investing $5.7 million in a couple of companies to support food processing infrastructure. We'll have more in a moment. The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
And joining us now is Dr. Roger McEowen, who is Ag Law and Tax Law Specialist at Washburn University School of Law. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Ken. Good to be with you.
All right, great to start off another year. These things have worked out well. There's always so much to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And normally we would maybe start the top 10 list of things went on in agriculture in the courtroom. That's going to have to wait for another day because right at the end of the year, the Biden administration came out and I guess kind of brought their own definition of what waters of the U.S. is, but really we just kind of are doing a rehash of a few years ago, right?
That's a good way to put it. And even though we're not talking about top 10, this is going to be one of them, obviously. And basically what we're doing now is we're going back to pre-2015. Of course, viewers remember that we had the Obama administration come up with a rule, and then the Trump administration, the EPA and the Corps went through under the Trump administration really prolonged work on coming up with a new rule that many in agriculture thought was more fair to agriculture and fair to all private property landowners. And that took a couple of years to really get that done. That came out in 2019. And now we have a reversal of that and said, no, the agencies have said, well, I guess we're changing our mind. We don't like that. We're going to go all the way back to pre-2015. And this one is it's pretty troubling to me on a couple of points, but primarily one because there's a pending U.S. Supreme Court case on the same issue. But here you have the administrative agency trying to say what the definition is before we know what the Supreme Court is going to say. And of course, the Supreme Court will have the final word, not the administrative agencies.
Right. So that was probably one of the biggest contentions that we heard from especially from agriculture groups was
Yeah.
why do it so quickly? Because it could all be for naught, and with the Supreme Court could rule that what they've tried to put into place now could be thrown out.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. It doesn't make sense. I don't know if they're trying to sway the court one direction or the other. Frankly, I don't think the court will pay any attention to this, other than the fact that now they have something to refer to if they want to, with respect to the Sackett opinion, which I don't anticipate is going to be out until February or March. And it may be out before these rules officially take effect because they're not effective until 60 days after they're published in the Federal Register. So we're looking in early March anyway before these rules become official. And we may or may not have the Supreme Court opinion by then. But Ken, a couple of things in these that really concern me. One is the new definition of adjacency. And adjacency doesn't mean just right next or abutting. It means now if it has a wet spot in a farm field has a substantial nexus to a water of the United States, then that's a regulable wetland. Well, the way they've defined things, it picks up all farm field tile drainage systems. This is going to be pretty difficult for people in the prairie pothole regions in the Dakotas and in Minnesota and upper Iowa. And we're back to regulating ditches and the vague definitions can give them access and control over private ponds and those types of things. And this is the battle that agriculture fought 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I think we're going to be back to the same battle pending what the U.S. Supreme Court says.
We're talking with Dr. Roger McEowen, who is a ag law and tax law specialist at the Washburn School of Law. He joins us every month to talk about situations just like this. Let's take a break. We'll continue the discussion of what might happen with the future of waters of the U.S. We'll do that in just a moment. Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com. Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law is joining us, and we're talking about the situation just came out from the administration at the end of the year dealing with waters of the U.S., the definition of what those are. And so, Dr. McEowen, I mean, production agriculture is just got to be scratching their head, regardless of where you are politically, because not only makes their job very difficult, but planning and what to do, even if you think you're doing the right thing, you might not.
Yeah, well, Ken, it's the same problem that we have on the tax side of things too, when Congress is always changing the rules or IRS comes out with these constantly changing interpretations that they don't make, go through the formal administrative procedure in terms of notice and comment. They just put an FAQ out on their website and say, well, here's the new rule. And an example of that is they just decided IRS just decided late in 2022 that, oh, well, yeah, Congress changed the rule with respect to 1099K reporting for 2022, but we don't have the people to do that with. So we're just going to pass on that for 22. So you get the same thing with Corps of Engineers and EPA constantly changing their mind, which in my view, it undercuts their entire credibility because you said X 2 years ago, now you say Y. Well, farmers and ranchers get caught in the middle of this. Make up your mind and stick with it. And then to come out with this new rule before the U.S. Supreme Court issues an opinion in a pending case on the same issue is just mind-boggling. And it is very frustrating, you're right, for farmers and ranchers. But again, I think there are two primary issues here, and one is the significant nexus test and the ability to establish a connection to downstream waters by surface water and shallow subsurface water. And they've defined that to pick up farm field drainage tile. And they even say that a shallow subsurface connection can be found below the ordinary root zone, where other wetland delineation factors may not be present. And that's what I mean. Frankly, that means farm drainage tile. And then there's nothing in there talking about drainage devices. And of course, I was involved in an Eighth Circuit case a number of years ago, and it kept ongoing after that because the government didn't want to follow what the court said with respect to a farmer's ability to maintain a drainage device. And that court case said you can do whatever you want with a drainage device as long as it doesn't change your farmland and wetland regime on your farm. This rule, I don't find any reference to that in there. And then they have something in there about prior converted cropland, and they had to clarify that prior converted cropland wasn't wetland. Well, wait a minute. Prior converted cropland is cropland. It's not wetland. So you're now defining dry land to clarify that it's not wetland. And if you wouldn't have done this, then it could have been wetland. That doesn't make any sense. So to read back to prior court cases when those court opinions were very, very confused, more confusion to the issue, in my view.
All right, Dr. McEowen, if folks want to learn more about this and other things that you blog about, how can they do that?
Well, it's posted. I have my most recent article on this posted on my website. That's washburnlaw.edu/Walter, WALTR. And it's also on K-State's Ag Manager website also.
All right, Dr. McEowen, we look forward to talking with you next month. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken.
Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law has joined us. Stay with us. We'll have more coming up in just a moment.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
As wheat commissioners, we are challenged with and charged with education, market development, and research. U.S. Wheat Technical Services are an extremely important part of our outreach to customers and service to customers around the world. We got a first-hand look at it by milling most of the 6 classes of wheat that the U.S. produces and is used domestically and on the international scene in a very competitive way. We've had a deep dive into the milling detail. It's been a great addition to having been on tour around the U.S. and around the world.
Having a greater understanding of the milling process and how wheat quality, wheat consistency, having a reliable wheat source impacts the milling process and the challenges of millers face, and then also how the millers have to pair the quality of wheat and the quality of flour to the next supply chain issue, the noodle manufacturer, the bread maker. Having a better understanding of the entire process of what happens to the wheat when it arrives at the mill, from the mill to the baker.
Each of these classes of wheat mills very differently, has different use characteristics, and we intend that these different varieties and classes of wheat compete very, very effectively. It's invaluable in understanding the detail that we are in and the competitive world we are in.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and LibertyLink that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm an agronomist at K-State, and today we're going to talk about staging corn plants that are too big to do the collared method in the field. So when we looked at plants in the field that still had all the leaves on the bottom, they were younger. Once we get past, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We counted the collars for a V6 corn plant. Once it gets too far past this stage, it's harder to find the collars on these leaves, because what happens is the upper plants on these leaves shade out the lower ones, and so the plant doesn't really need these lower leaves anymore, so it loses them. But when that happens, we can't find the first leaf anymore to know how to stage this. But we've talked about how a lot of stages in this part of the corn plant's life are still important for farmers, so farmers still need to be able to tell what stage their corn plants are. And so we're going to talk about a way that we can stage corn plants without being able to find the first leaf. And what we have to do for that is take a corn plant and cut it in half with a sharp knife, which I've already done here. And we'll notice that as we're looking at this corn plant, we can see these rings that go up the corn plant this way. And those rings are called nodes, and nodes are places on a plant where new organs can grow from. So like a leaf or a branch, they grow from nodes. If we think about our bodies, where the nodes are on our bodies, we have hips and our legs grow from our hips. We have shoulders where our head and our arms grow from. Corn has nodes where its leaves grow from. So that's a way that you can think about nodes. When we're talking about nodes, if you'll remember, when we were talking about our V5 to V6 corn plants, when that stem first comes above the ground, that critical stage, we can use that information to help us stage these corn plants, because if we look at the base of these plants, if we cut it all the way to the bottom, there's a triangle at the base where it's just really dense. It's like a lot of rings are all smushed together, because that's what's happening. The first 4 nodes are all compressed at the bottom. And the 5th node will be the first line that we see separated from that triangle at the bottom. So what we can do then is find on our corn plant a leaf that is still attached. We're going to use this one. If we follow the sheath, which is this part that's wrapped around the stem, to the part where it is attached, which would be right here, we can see it's attached at this node. So if we count up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is leaf number 6. So if we know that, we can count up the collars the rest of the way on the plant. So this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So this would be a V13 corn plant with 13 collars, and that would be a way that we could determine those stages. If we look at a younger plant, we can see that we can see the nodes in this corn plant. They're a little harder to see when they're smaller, but if we look at the bottom, we can still see the triangle with all the dense area, and then the first node up from the bottom. So in a month, in a couple weeks, this plant will look like this one, and we'll be able to see the nodes a lot more clearly. But cutting open a plant, counting the nodes with the collars is a way that we can stage corn when the leaves fall off, and a way that farmers can know what stage their corn is at in the field.
Sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
For 23 years, Robert Keener was a strong advocate for agriculture. Before passing in the fall of 2021, he was an assistant professor at Fort Hays State University. He felt his greatest achievement was the relationship he built with students. He served as a volunteer for the Ellis County Farm Bureau Kids Ag Days, often bringing college students to the event so they could present to the children attending. Keener's life impacted the future of the agriculture industry through his dedication and service to growing youth leaders.
Garrett and Kaylee love farm in Gray County, where they raise cattle and grow milo, soybeans, corn, and wheat on dry land and irrigated acres. Like many young farm families, the Love family has their hand in various parts of the industry. In addition to raising their 4 children, Abby, Lauren, Grayson, and Eliza, the Love family has diversified their income through a pheasant and deer hunting business. Conservation is crucial to their operation, which has used no-till practices to protect the soil and preserve moisture. The Love family is a community and civic-minded family. Garrett served for several years in the state senate before their family began to grow, and still volunteers his time advising current elected officials and candidates on governing and campaign topics. They have advertised and helped with different events Gray County Farm Bureau has hosted, including putting on the county fairs Pedal Pole and Chicken Chase. At the state level, Garrett and Kaylee have attended several Kansas Young Farmers and Ranchers conferences, as well as annual meetings. They have also given input regarding agriculture policy and political decisions. The Love family sees Kansas Farm Bureau as the most effective voice for agriculture in the state and country. Their vision for the Bureau is for it to continue to be a voice for farmers and ranchers across the country, addressing rural issues and concerns.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
The Environmental Protection Agency and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have announced the finalization of a rule to rescind the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, replacing it with yet another new definition for waters of the U.S. The new regulatory definition proposed in December 2021 attempts to reinstate the pre-2015 regulation, but in reality substantively changes it, posing significant risk to cattle producers and landowners. National Cattlemen's Beef Association previously called for EPA to retain agricultural exclusions for small, isolated, and temporary water features that commonly appear on farms and ranches. According to NCBA Chief Counsel for Government Affairs, Mary Thomas Hart, these exclusions had broad support and were included in WOTUS rules under both Republican and Democratic administrations. The new rule, however, fails to clearly exempt isolated and ephemeral features from federal jurisdiction and relies on case-by-case determinations to assess whether a feature is federally regulated. Hart said it is a far cry from the regulatory certainty provided by the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, creating a significant and costly burden for agricultural producers. She added that the timing of the new rule could not be worse, as the Supreme Court is currently considering Sackett v. EPA, which will provide much-needed clarity related to the waters of the U.S. definition. The Supreme Court is set to issue its decision on the case in spring 2023. Meanwhile, a coalition of national trade associations will seek to halt implementation of the rule in federal court.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Good morning. This is Jake McCall here at Pinion Ag. The start of the new year has seen some exciting news around the world. To start, commodities markets are carefully watching the reopening process in China, where COVID is spreading rapidly across a population that has been largely sheltered for the past few years. While the loosened restrictions are good news as demand for commodities like soybeans is likely to expand, it may take a little while as businesses deal with the rapid spread of disease, forcing workers to stay home and recover before they are able to return. Over the weekend to our south, Brazilian police were deployed to curb damage from rioters who stormed government offices in protest of their October election. Former President Bolsonaro is currently residing in Florida, while there are fears of military intervention to restore him to power over now President Lula. All is to say that unrest is ongoing in the South American country, which could affect exportabilities of their currently massive corn and soybean crops. After an end-of-the-year run-up across the grain sectors, corn, wheat, and beans are well off of their highs. The supply and demand report for the USDA releases on January 12th will likely have an outsized impact on markets and give us an idea as to where we are headed in the near future. Cattle markets continue to see strength on lower inventory numbers, with cash bids advancing around the high 150s into the 160s, supported by a strong box beef cutout. In other markets, the dollar continues to trend lower, while crude is bouncing around between $70 and $80 per barrel. If you have any interest, don't hesitate to call us at 888-452-8751. I'm Jake McCall with Pinion Ag, and I hope you have a great and productive day.
That's our show this week. Be social with us at kansasagreport.net or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.